Hi, I am Mary Beth Temple from MBT Creates, and today we're going to take a look at this adorable chenille crochet kit from Needle Creations. Now this one makes this soft little bunny. She's very squishy and she's made of a soft chenille yarn with our little bows added on and embroidered features. So when I open up the kit, the first thing I'm going to see is this bag. So I'm going to open it up and everything we need is in here. We have our stuffing. We have our accent yarns. There's the pink for the bows and the black for the embroidered features and the yarn needle so we could put the embroidered features on. Here's our main color of yarn, which in the case of the Chenille Bunny is white. And then we have our instructions and a crochet hook. So let's get started with our first part of the Chenille Bunny. To get started with our little friend here, we're going to make the two legs separately, join them, and then work the body all in one piece all the way up to the neck. This is a terrific way of doing this because it eliminates a lot of the sewing up that you might otherwise have to do later. So let's begin with a magic ring. To make our magic ring, begin with your tail yarn. That's the side of the yarn attached to the cut edge. Drape it over your hand like so. You want about 4 or 5 inches hanging on the tail. I'm going to take my yarn, I'm holding it into place with my thumb. I'm going to take it over my index finger on a slight angle, under my middle finger, and over my index finger again, making an X. So this X is how I'm going to start my magic ring. I'm going to take my crochet hook, I'm going to insert it under this leg of the X, grab this leg and pull it through, and then I want to use my right hand thumb and index finger to pinch that together so I don't lose the shape. Pull my fingers out of the way and make sure that when I'm stitching, I have my working yarn ready to stitch, not the tail yarn. At that point, I'm going to make a chain 1, just to kind of hold everything together. So for round 1, it says 6 single crochet in ring. So what's going to happen here is you're going to make a single crochet like you always would, but you're inserting your hook into the ring instead of into an existing stitch. So that's 1, 2, and you can see I'm crocheting over these 2 strands. That's 1 that's part of the loop, or the ring, if you will, and 1 that is the tail. There's 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's my 6 single crochet. Now I'm going to take this tail. See how it's twisted around a little bit? I'm just going to pull it so it untwists. Let's see if we can get that all the way out. And now I'm going to use my right hand. I'm going to hold on to my stitches and I'm going to use my left hand to pull that tail. And what's going to happen is these stitches, those 6 single crochet that I made, are going to form into a ring. So now I have my 6 single crochet all in a ring, and I am ready to start with round 2. Now for round 2, it says 2 single crochets in each single crochet. Now sometimes it's kind of hard to see at the beginning where that first single crochet is. It can be a little tight from where you tugged your yarn, so I like to count backwards. I'll go 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And that tells me where that first stitch is. So I'm going to put 2 single crochet, let me tighten up my loop a little bit here, in that first single crochet. There's 1. Remember, like I said, that first one could be a little bit tight. That's okay. It's because we tightened up that strand. So there's 2, and I'm going to put 2 in each one around. Here we are at the end of round 2. You might notice I grabbed a stitch marker to mark the last stitch of the round. That's going to help me with counting going forward. If you don't have a stitch marker to hand, you can use a contrasting color of yarn. You could use a safety pin or a bobby pin, whatever you have to just mark that last stitch. It helps you make sure that your counting is correct. Now for round 3, it says single crochet in next 3 stitches, 2 single crochet in next stitch, which is an increase, 3 times. So we're going to single crochet in each of the next 3 stitches. That's 1, 2, 3, and then to make that increase, we're going to put 2 single crochet in the next stitch. So that's 1 and 2. The second one's in that same stitch as the first one. Now, because those instructions were in a parentheses and it says to do it 3 times, that's what we're going to do. So we're going to single crochet in each of the next 3. 1, 2, 3, and then 2 in the next one, and we're going to do that one more time and move that stitch marker up to the last stitch of the round. So you can see we're just starting to get a little bit of a curvature at the bottom of the leg. So 2 things are going to happen here. One is there is a note that says weave in the tail after round 3. So let me extend that loop. I'm going to grab my yarn needle and I'm going to go ahead and weave that tail in now, simply because I'm not going to be able to reach down here later. And then rounds 4, 5, and 6, it says single crochet in each stitch around. So for rounds 4, 5, and 6, there's no increasing or decreasing. I'm going to weave in my tail. I'm going to stitch those 3 rounds, and I'm going to come back and show you round 7. I want to take this opportunity to talk about the fabric that you're making just a little bit. Now, 2 things I want to point out. For me personally, I tend to be a loose crocheter, and I also tend to crochet more loosely on camera than I do when I'm making my personal projects, just because if I crochet too tightly on camera, it's really hard for me to demonstrate. But you want to pay attention at this point, now that you've done some work even rounds, to see what your fabric looks like. You want it to be firm because you don't want stuffing to poke out in between the stitches. But you don't want it to be so tight that it is not an enjoyable experience to crochet, especially with chenille yarn, which due to the inherent nature of its halo, sometimes it can be a little difficult for you to peek at the top and see where that stitch is, and you're really going by feel to some extent. You don't want your fabric to be so tight that your bunny friend is stiff, nor do you want to be so tight that you can't get your hook comfortably into the stitch. Now, some people, instead of doing a regular single crochet like we're doing in this video, will do a yarn under single crochet or a crossed single crochet, and those are techniques that you can experiment with if you need a much firmer fabric, if you're crocheting way loosely and you don't want to switch out the hook. So I did just want to make a point that you want to make sure that you have a firm but not a stiff fabric. For round 7, we're going to take a look at our first decrease round. It says single crochet in the next 3 stitches, single crochet 2 together, which means your decrease is made 3 times. So when we increased, we took our round from 12 stitches to 15. Now that we're going to decrease, we're going to take our round from 15 back to 12. I'm going to show you 2 different ways to do the single crochet decrease, and you can pick the one that works best for you. So the first thing we're going to do is single crochet in the next 3 stitches. So that's 1, 2, 3. Now this is a traditional single crochet decrease that I'm going to show you first. You're going to insert your hook in the next stitch, yarn over and draw up a loop, and then insert your hook in the next stitch and yarn over and draw up a loop, and now you have 3 loops on your hook. 1, 2, 3, yarn over and draw through all 3. Now that is the single crochet decrease that most of us learned, but I'm going to show you a slightly different one. Here's my single crochet in the next 3 stitches. And I don't know that the world has come to an agreement on what this one is called. I call it the amigurumi single crochet decrease, but it lays a little flatter than the single crochet two together, and I like it for toys. So instead of inserting my hook in the next stitch, yarn over, and then the next one and yarn over, I'm going to grab the front leg only of the next stitch. So I'm coming up in the center of the stitch. I've only got one leg of that stitch on top of my hook, and then I'm going to insert my hook regularly into the next stitch, yarn over. I'm going to draw it through the stitch and that first leg, and I have 2 loops on my hook, yarn over and draw through 2. I'm going to finish my single crochet decrease, my amigurumi single crochet decrease. I like this for toys because I think it lays flatter and it's not quite as lumpy as a traditional single crochet decrease, but let's look at that one more time. 2, 3, and let me get my stitch marker out of the way here because I need to work in that stitch. Okay, I'm going to grab the front leg only of the next single crochet, and I'm going to insert my hook under it, and then all the way through the next single crochet. So there's my working loop, there's my front leg of the first single crochet, and there's both legs of the single crochet. I'm going to yarn over, draw it through the stitch, through that leg, and I'm having to pull a little bit, but that's just because I'm trying to get an angle where I can show you what's going on. I have 2 loops on my hook. I'm going to yarn over and finish my single crochet. So I prefer that decrease for this project, but you can do whichever one works best for you. And it looks like I have broken my stitch marker here, and I'm going to have to switch to a different color. So that is round 7. For rounds 8 through 11, we're going to work even. We're going to single crochet in each stitch around. So let me work on rounds 8 to 11, and then we'll talk about how to end off. Okay, I have completed up through round 11, and I got my stitch marker out of the way because I'm done stitching this leg. And what we're going to do for the first leg is slip stitch in the next stitch just to even off that top, and then end off. We're going to leave a little bit of a tail, maybe 4 to 6 inches, because we want to have enough of a tail to comfortably weave in. I'll just pull that through, give that a little tug, and then it says weave in the end and stuff with fiber fill. When I make the second leg, I'm not going to put that slip stitch in, and I'm not going to end it off, because in the second leg, the next part of the instructions is going to tell me how to join those 2 legs together to start the body. I also wanted to talk very briefly about the stuffing. When you open up this packet, it doesn't look like enough stuffing or a lot of stuffing, but I'm here to tell you, once you expose this to the air, it's going to expand. So we're just going to keep pulling till we get all of our stuffing out. Oh, it does not want to come today. Here we go. I'm going to look at that blowing up. So if you're worried that you do not have enough stuffing, don't be worried. You have absolutely plenty. Look how much that's expanding. I'm going to just start grabbing up some little bits and stuff my leg and weave in that end. Then I'm going to make my second leg and come back and join you to make the body. All right, here are my 2 legs. This is the one that I did earlier, and this is the one that I just finished, remembering that it does say that you should not slip stitch and end off at the end. So we're moving on to round 12. It says single crochet in next 6 stitches of working leg. So the working leg is the one that I'm still attached to, and I still have my stitch marker just to keep things moving. And so I'm going to go 1, 2, and 6. Now it says join yarn with slip stitch in the same stitch as the last slip stitch of the first leg. So here's the first leg. I know it's a little difficult to see, but there's my slip stitch. It was right here. So I'm going to join my yarn here. So I'm inserting my hook, yarn over, there's my slip stitch. So now my two legs are together. Now it says single crochet in 12 stitches of the first leg. So I'm going to make that join the last single crochet of my round. I just think it's going to be easier. So I'm going to go 1, 2, and remember 12 is all we have, so I'm going to go all the way around. 12, that's where my slip stitch is, so it's a little bit snug, but it's okay. So I have my 12 single crochets on that first leg. Now it says single crochet in the next 6 stitches of the working leg. So I'm going back to the leg that has the marker in it. And I'm not going to work in that stitch because I already did. And I have to just triple check there. So I should have 6 left. 1, 5, and then my last stitch, my number 6, is going to be the one that had the stitch marker in it, because remember I was marking the end of the round. So moving forward, my round is going to go all the way around both legs, and it has 24 stitches in it. I got 12 from this leg and 12 from this leg, so the round goes all the way around, and it has 24 stitches. Now as we keep going all the way through round 27, you will see some decreases along the side and some in the front and the back. And the reason we do that is to stagger the decreases so you don't get any little weird seam lines. Because, as you'll notice, you'll go to smaller, 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 and when you get up to round 27, you only have 12 stitches left. It's a great idea to stuff as you go. So every time you've completed a few rounds, just push a little more stuffing in there. That's going to help the stuffing lay more evenly and also prevent you from having to really jam your fingers into the neck opening, which is smaller than the opening that you have down here. So let's go ahead and finish the body. I did also want to make a note here that when you're ending off the body, the ears, the arms, and the bows, follow along with the notes. It tells you to leave either an 8-inch or a 10-inch end, and that's because we want to be able to sew our parts together later without having to start and end a new strand of yarn. So I left myself a nice long tail here so that when I sew the head to the neck, this yarn is right here waiting for me to sew with. Let's take a look at the head. While there is nothing happening in the head that you haven't seen before, I'm going to take this quick opportunity to just review the magic ring because you use it a lot in this pattern. I'm going to hold my 4-inch strand or so over my left hand. I'm going to take my yarn on a slight angle over my index finger, under my middle finger, and over my index finger again, forming an X. I'm using my ring and pinky finger and my thumb to hold everything into place so you can see I can move my hand around, nothing's going to move. You can also see that I have a little bit of space here between my index and my middle finger. Going to take my hook, put it under the top right leg of the X, grab the top left leg and pull it through. That gets me my loop on my hook, but I want it to stay there, so I'm going to use my right hand to pinch that while I get my left hand out of the way, making sure that I have my working yarn set up and not my tail, because it's a really easy mistake to make is to start stitching with your tail. I'm going to go ahead and chain 1. I'm going to put my 6 single crochets in the ring, making sure I'm crocheting over those 2 strands. Now, holding on to the stitches with my right hand, I'm going to untangle that tail if there's any tangling happening. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. So I'm going to hold the stitches with my right hand, pull that tail with my left hand, let that form into a ring, And then I'm going to go ahead and use my stitch marker or my safety pin or my hairpin or whatever, mark the last stitch of the round, and then keep going like we did earlier. The next round is round 2. That's putting 2 single crochet in each stitch around. And then at that point, it's very much like doing the leg. We're going to increase from the top. We're making our head from the top down. We're going to increase, increase, increase. Then we will have a few work even rounds in here in which there are no increases or decreases. And then we'll decrease, decrease, decrease. And when we finish off, remember I said the body was going to end with 12 stitches? The head is also going to end with 12 stitches, and that having the same number of stitches on both sides is going to make this really easy to sew together. Next, let's take a brief look at the rest of the appendages. There's nothing happening for the arms that we haven't already gone over a few times. I do want to point out you want to get your stuffing in there at the end of round 13, because round 14 is doing that single crochet decrease 6 times. That's going to leave you with 6 stitches, which is a pretty tiny opening. And I also want to remind you that the arms are one of those sections where you want to leave a nice long tail at the end. For sewing up, the pattern recommends about 8 inches. We're going to need that to sew the arm to the body. For the ears, much like for the arms in the legs, you're going to start with your magic ring, do some increasing, do some decreasing, and do some rounds even. The only things I wanted to remind you about the ears is that we're not going to stuff them. We want them to be soft and floppy. That you want to weave that first tail in this section of the work while you can still reach. And you're going to leave yourself that nice 8-inch long piece of yarn at the end to leave yourself something to sew with. Let's take a look at the bows. The last part that I need to make is this cute little pink bow, and we're going to make 2 of them. So with our pink chenille yarn, we're going to put a slip knot on our hook. Remember, we're going to make a loop, leaving about 4 to 6 inches at the end. We're going to make a little twist so that the tail is on the top and the working yarn is on the bottom. We're going to reach through the loop from the back to grab our working yarn and pull it through, and use the tail to close off the slip knot. So I'm going to put that slip knot on my hook and tighten her up. Now it says chain 3, 1, 2, 3. 2 treble crochet, chain 2, slip stitch in 3rd chain from hook. So that's the very first chain that we made. So to make our treble crochet, we're going to yarn over twice, 1, 2. And then we're going to make it very similar to a double crochet. We're going to put our hook in that chain, yarn over and draw up a loop, and now we have 4 loops on our hook. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to yarn over and draw through 2 3 times. So that's 1, 2, 3. So you get a stitch that is taller than a double crochet. Let's do that again in the same stitch. We're going to yarn over twice. Remember that yarn over is back to front. We're going to insert our hook in that same chain that we were working in before. Yarn over and draw up a loop. I have 4 loops on my hook, 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to yarn over and draw through 2 3 times. That's why in North America we call it a treble or a triple crochet. So we've done our 2 treble crochets. We're going to chain 2, 1, 2, and slip stitch in that same chain where we were working before. So what we have right here is 1/2 of the bow. Now it says working on the opposite side of the foundation chain. So the foundation, let me get that tail out of the way. The foundation chain is down here. That's the one we were working in already. Chain 2, 1, 2. 2 treble crochet, chain 2 slip stitch in the same chain. So it is the same chain that we were working on before, but we're working in the opposite side. So there's 1 treble, 2 trebles, chain 2, and slip stitch. So there is my bow is completed. Now it says fasten off, leaving a 10-inch length for sewing. So we're going to leave a nice long tail here because we're going to use that to attach the bow to our bunny friend. The next thing we're going to look at is the section called finishing and assembly. We're going to start putting our friend together. All right, we're getting ready for finishing and assembly. So you're going to have your body with your legs attached. And just as a gentle reminder, my guy's a little bigger than the original one. Once again, just because I crochet so loosely when I'm making videos to make my life easier. So you should have yours, you're going to be a little bit smaller, like the very first one that we showed. So I have my body and my legs attached. I have my head with some stuffing. I'm going to have 2 bows. I only made 1 on camera, but you're going to have 2. You're going to have 2 arms. Once again, I've only made 1. And you're going to have 2 ears. And the ears don't take any stuffing, but the other guys do. So for putting this together, the first thing that we're going to do is attach the head to the body. And the instructions tell us to take the yarn tail from the body and thread it through our yarn needle. Matching stitches, position and sew round 27 of the body to round 14 of the head, stuffing with fiberfill as needed before closing up the opening. So I have the same number of stitches on the head as I do on the body, and it doesn't really matter where I start as long as I have the same number of stitches. And it's a little fiddly to get started, but it absolutely gets easier as you go. So I'm going to go in the next stitch after where my round join was, and I'm going to grab a matching stitch on the head. Let's bring that down a little bit so you can see better. And I'm going to pull that through, and there's no need to worry about weaving in the end at the end of the body because I'm using it to sew with. So we're not attaching another strand of yarn. So then I'm going to go to my next stitch on the body and my next stitch on the head. Pull that needle through. This is a whip stitch. If you like to sew, that is what this is called. And the other reason it's telling me to pay attention to the stuffing, I have stuffed the head and I have stuffed the body. But it's possible when I'm almost finished that there might be some little empty space going here at the neck. So I'm going to put a few more stitches in and then we'll go look at that stuffing. Here we are coming at the end. I have 4 stitches left on the body and 4 stitches left on the head. And I'm just going to take a little bit of extra fiberfill and stuff this area right here. You don't want to do that till the end. You want to make sure that you have some closure so the stuffing doesn't pop out. And also you don't want to have overstuffed your parts when you begin sewing them together, otherwise your needle can get caught. So let's see, we have number 3 here. Number 2 of the 2 that I have left now. Let's see, that'll go there. And number 1. So I'm going to pull this a little snug, and then I'm going to take a couple of catch stitches right here to make sure it doesn't come undone. And then I'm going to weave in my end. Now I'm going to show you another little trick that I use frequently for amigurumi and stuffed toys. Let me just get that under a couple of stitches. When I'm getting ready to end off my strand, and I'm going to do this for every appendage that we sew on, I like to take my needle, put it down in a stitch, and bring it up any old where a couple of inches away. And now I'm going to give that yarn a little bit of a tug and clip it, and then that little end is going to recede back into the stuffing. The reason I do that is if I have a long strand going on in here, it's going to be really hard for that strand to pull out. So it's just a little bit of extra insurance. You're never going to see the extra ends on the inside, and it almost functions as a little extra bit of stuffing. So we're going to do that whenever we put on an appendage. So the next thing that it suggests is that we do the arms. So let's take one of my arms here. I'm going to once again use the tail from the arm to do the sewing. This is so clever because it means that we don't have to begin and end new strands every time we want to sew something on. Now it says position and sew at round 27 of the body, one on each side. Now round 27 was the last round, so it's telling us that we're going to put that arm right up next to the neck. Now when we put the head on, it didn't really matter because the head looks the same all the way around. But with the arms, we really want to make sure that we're getting one on each side. And you can see I'm folding it just the least little bit flat here. And there's only a very few stitches left at the end of the arm, and that is because we had those decreases in the last round, and I don't want the stuffing to be popping out of the top. I want this to lay very smoothly and flat up against the body. So I'm going to go through 2 layers of stitches here and catch a stitch on the body. And I'm going to do that just a couple of times. Here's my middle 2 stitches. And there's my last 2 stitches, because remember, we only had 6 at the end. Once I have that nice and secure, I'm going to run my yarn down through the body because it says to attach it again at round 20. That's going to keep the arms sort of folded down to the side. And it's easier to count backwards. So if this is round 27, 26, 25, 24, 23, 22, 21, 20. So I missed it by 1. Let's try that again. And I want it to be right here at the side. So again, I'm just going to take my yarn needle and run it through the body. I'm not going to pull too tight. I don't want to pull it out of shape. And attach it right here with just a couple of catch stitches. This is just to keep our little friend nice and flat. It's not to hold the arm on. So again, I can weave this in using the stitches from the arm or the stitches from the body, but now I can go ahead and weave in that tail. Now for the ears, it says thread the yarn tail onto your yarn needle and attach the ears at round 4 and again at round 6. So once again, I have my guy laying flat so I can see what's going on. And I'm going to count my rounds. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to put my ear right here. And you see I've kind of flattened it out to make sure it's going to hang the way that I want it to hang. And I'm going to use my yarn tail to attach through both layers of the ear, and then I'm going around round 4 through both layers of the ear, round 4, etc. And it's okay to sort of scrunch that in a little bit so it's not super wide. And then it says, let's see, secure again at round 6. So I'm going to take my stitches, and then it says secure it again at round 6. So here's 4 that we sewed into. Here's 6 down here. This is just to make sure the ear stays flat. So once again, I'm going to put my needle down here and just take a couple of stitches. The stitches that we just made are the ones that are holding the ear on to our stuffed toy, and so those are the ones I was kind of worried about being sturdy. These are a little less important. It's just to hold the ear down flat. And once again, I can weave in my end either into the head, or I'm more likely to do it right here. Just go back and forth in a couple of stitches under the ear, because nobody's ever going to see that. Now we're going to take a look at the bows. So it says, using the yarn tail from the bow, wrap the yarn around the center 4 or 5 times, tie in a knot with the starting yarn tail to secure. So here's my long end that I left, and I'm going to make this the right side of my bow. So I'm going to wrap it around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It gives me a little more definition right here. And then I'm going to tie these 2 ends together in an overhand knot. Let's see which I'll leave with. Well, they're pretty much the same size. I will leave whichever one is longer to sew the bow onto the bunny, and I'm going to trim the other end very close. But here is my little bow. Now it says thread the needle with the yarn tail and sew in front of the ear. So here's my bunny with the ear, and I'm going to put the bow right there. And weave in the tail the same way we've been doing. After this, we're going to take a look. I'm going through the wraps. I feel like that's the most secure way to stitch it on. So after we get this finished and weave in that tail the way we wove in the other tails, we're going to take a closer look at the embroidery. To embroider the nose and mouth, we're going to use the pink floss. And I'm going to give you a little tip here too. It says thread needle with length of pink floss, bring floss out from the center of the head between rounds 10 and 11. Now, my personal experience is when I have the floss in my hand and I'm trying to anchor the end and trying to get started, I'm not going to remember where rounds 9 and 10 and 11 are. So I like to use either my stitch marker or a little strand of yarn to put a little mark where I want my embroidery to be, because that way it helps me when I'm getting started. I'm not trying to guess, but also if I put the marker in a place and I don't like it, I can move the marker. It's far easier to do that than to have to rip out a bunch of embroidery. So we're going to bring the floss out between rounds 10 and 11. So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 is way down here. And I think that is a little low for my taste. So I am going to make an executive decision and bring my yarn up a little higher. And again, this is why we use the marker. This is why we check. Because if I had gone all the way down here to 10 or 11 because I stitched that in so tightly, I don't think that I would have liked the way that looked. So I'm going to bring my yarn out right here. What I was saying earlier about yarn, if you don't have a stitch marker laying around, you can always just do that. Just pull a little snippet of the leftover yarn through, and now you know where you're going to start. So I'm just getting a good idea here. My other bow would have been here. I think this is what I want to do. So I'm going to take my floss. I'm going to thread it through my needle. And when I bring it out in this section, when I bring it out in the center, the way they told me to do, you know how it'll tell you to, at the end of weaving in ends, I'll tell you to bring that needle through the stitches towards the back. I'm going to do that here too. I'm going to bring the needle through the back of some of these single crochet stitches. I want to make sure that I'm not seeing the needle or the floss come through, but by doing that, it's going to give that end a little more of an anchor, because we really can't go back at the end and weave it in. And I want to be careful. You'll notice I'm leaving a little tad bit of it out, and that's so I don't pull it out accidentally. So the first thing I'm going to do is go up over 2 rounds to get myself started. Whoop, I got caught on my leg here. And you see this little guy, it wants to pull out, and I don't want that to happen. I want to leave it there so it's anchored. And then it says to go ahead and just add some stitches to make a little nose, and that you can go as far as 4 stitches wide. So if I go 4 stitches wide, I'll go 2 this way and 2 this way. Remember, embroidery is more of an art than a science, and if you don't like it, you can pull it out and try again until you do like it. You can put as many stitches here as you need to. So I like to sort of do the outline first. Like that, there we go. And then I'm going to fill in some of these spaces. I'm going to split the stitches. But you see, I'm always coming up in the same place down here. All right, so here's my little nose. I'm also going to make a vertical line straight down. And I have plenty of floss left, so I'm actually going over that stitch twice. And now I'm going to make a little W. I'm going down where I came out, and I'm going 1 stitch over, and I'm going to go down where I came out before and up where I came out before. Now I'm going down where I came up before. I'm going 2 stitches over, and remember, I had plenty of floss left after I got my nose the way I wanted it to. So I'm going to go ahead and double stitch in here. You don't have to if you don't want to. Now I'm coming down at the bottom of the V on this side, once again up where we were before. You don't want to pull these too tight. You don't want to squinch it all in. And now I'm going 1 over and down 1, just like we did on the other side. And then over here. And then I'm going to end off right where I came out before. Same deal. It's hard for you to see in the video, but I'm working my needle through some single crochet stitches, holding my needle to the back, because I want to give a little extra security here. Give it a little trim. And now that my stitches are nice and tight, I can give this a little tug and a little trim, and that end will pop right back in. So the very last thing we have to do is put on our eyes, and to do that we're going to need the black floss. One more time, I'm going to set up my black floss the same way I did my pink by working it through the back of some stitches and leaving myself a tail hanging out to prevent myself from pulling out the tail. And you can follow along with the pattern. It says to go between rounds 7 and 8. But you may remember I moved my nose up a little bit because I didn't like where it was originally, so I didn't go between 7 and 8. I am going on vibes. So there is one eye, but I do like that little angle that we had on the original, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Let's see, I think I pulled that a little too tight. I'm going to use my needle to loosen up the stitch a little bit. And I'm going to put one on this side. And because I had so much extra black floss in my kit, as I did with the little mouth, I'm going over each stitch a couple of times. And then this is even trickier because it's black. And again, I know it's hard to see, but I'm working my needle through the stitches and keeping them to the back of the work. And then doing the trick that we did before, just running it through the stuffing to leave a nice long tail to make it harder to pull out. I think that's a little tight. There we go. Again, I'm rushing a little bit here. We can trim that first end because I'm on camera. I think I would have gone a little more slowly and paid a little more attention if I was off, but I wanted you to get the general gist of how things were working. So here is the bunny I made originally, and here is its slightly looser cousin that we just made on camera. Once again, I am Mary Beth Temple here on behalf of our friends at Needle Creations, and I thank you for spending your time with me and hope you had a great time making a bunny of your very own.